Hey, how you doing? Classic mode! There was an official blog post recently explaining what classic mode is, or should I say how it differs from normal mode. I've put a link in the description to that if you've not seen it already. This particular video isn't to repeat those differences as such, but to try and convince you why those differences matter, and why they make for a better Battlefield experience, at least in my opinion. I'm well aware that some of these points are hugely subjective, but I'm going to run through each of them and hopefully plant the seed of that idea that maybe they're for the best, and that maybe you should be playing Classic Mode too. The reason I'm doing this in the first place is that, despite the Battlefield blog post, and despite the odd discussion on the forums and on Reddit, there are still precious few servers running this game mode. There are a few on PC, it's fair to say, but PS4 and possibly Xbox, I'm not entirely sure, perhaps you could let me know. On PS4 there are a handful of active servers at best. Plenty have the classic preset, but no one is playing in them. So I'm going to give this a shot regardless, because I have genuinely found classic mode to be the most enjoyable way to play this game. Firstly, let me give you an idea of my experience with the franchise as a whole. I've owned and played most of the Battlefield games, bar some of the early console titles like Modern Combat and The First Bad Company. I've also played a few of the mods, in particular Desert Combat for 1942, which was amazing, and Project Reality for Battlefield 2. Currently installed on my machine are BF2, BF3 and BF4. I've played BF3 and BF4 on both console and PC. In BF3 I played about 90% hardcore because I hated Doritos and still do. In BF4 I started with hardcore and still tend to play that mode with friends, but preferred normal mode because the infamous netcode issues meant that increased time to kill became quite important. The removal of the minimap and compass from hardcore on BF4 also meant that I felt certain balancing aspects of the game were an issue. Generally speaking, in fact, I found BF4 hardcore to be quite unbalanced and poorly represented as the alternative to normal mode. Classic mode has fixed all that for me. It is the ultimate Battlefield experience, and here is why. No 3D spotting. Where do I start? 3D spotting, aka Doritos, has been my most hated addition to the game. Purely and simply, it is a way to make it easier for people to see enemy units across the map. It is, in my opinion, a crutch. I think you should have to work a little bit to locate enemy positions. I think using cover and unexpected flanking routes should be rewarded, or at least not so easily thwarted by the great big orange symbol above your head that's only there because most players simply spam the spot key. It also makes the plethora of camos, adaptive or otherwise, mostly pointless. There are many situations where it seems only fair that a vehicle or soldier should be adequately hidden, or at least partially obstructed, but the orange marker persists and sticks out like the proverbial something or other, not to mention reducing the benefit of having flare on weapons and vehicles. In summary, I believe it negates some of the elements of skillful play. I'll include the lack of kill cam here as well, because it performs a similar task of making it easy for you to work out where a player has killed you from, and for a few seconds at least where he's moving to. You just shouldn't be allowed to have that information handed to you on a big orange plate. Health and no regeneration. As with hardcore, when your vehicle or person takes damage, in classic mode you must seek assistance from your teammates to regenerate. It will not simply happen for you if you do nothing more than survive an encounter. This is a fundamental team play mechanic. I think that having auto regen in BF3 and BF4 has sucked some of the teamwork out of Battlefield recently and promotes the lone wolf style of gameplay. You can still go it alone, of course, provided you carry the right tools, but who needs a health bag when you can sit in a corner for a minute and fix yourself without it? A team that works together and supports each other is the team that deserves to have the advantage, and some of this advantage is removed with auto regen. I appreciate that with jets there are maps that don't provide runways on which to land and repair, but there is always somewhere for a skilled pilot to fix his aircraft. And you know what? I like that it's harder to repair sometimes. I like the risk taking involved with finding a flat bit of ground to set down on and be vulnerable for a short time. I consider it an important balancing aspect of the attack check, for example, which is an extremely powerful unit for a number of reasons. Also, on the subject of health is of course the fact that, like normal mode and unlike hardcore, health is at 100%. This is extremely important because all weapons in game are balanced around that fact. With the recent full patch, changes were made to adjust the time to kill, making it fractionally longer in order to reduce the impact of latency amongst players. Although that can at times feel less realistic, it fits the way BF4 maps are sized and designed. 100% health and current damage models seem to be reducing the frustrations experienced with kill trades and dying around corners. It will never be completely eliminated. It's just a fact of global gaming on the interwebs. Squad Leader Spawn. This is a slightly less vital gameplay mechanic, but one that I still think holds value. It emphasises the role and importance of the squad leader. It adds an interesting dimension to general gameplay. I've heard it argued that it's frustrating to be in a squad with a poor squad leader for whatever reason, but there is nothing to stop people leaving and joining other squads, or creating their own squads. It also highlights the ever-useful spawn beacon, giving more value to the role of the recon player. Reloading. Relating of course to the way, like hardcore, with classic mode reloading without emptying your magazine completely means all remaining rounds in that outgoing mag will be lost. Again, this is a slightly less dramatic issue, but it still adds yet another layer of complexity. With complexity comes a greater gap between a player that is skilled and one that isn't. No third-person vehicle cam. This is probably one of the more controversial changes. In BF2 and previous Battlefield titles that could be referred to as representing the classic experience, third-person perspective was part of the game. It is thus argued that classic mode should include this ability, but I tend to disagree. I think it takes you out of the first-person shooter experience, and as a result slightly reduces the immersion. But again, purely subjective. I don't think that just because it was in previous games, it should also be included in the current one, even if it is called classic mode. More importantly, it renders a key vehicle customization slot, like proximity scan, completely redundant. There are also a couple of items which already exist in normal mode, but are additions over and above hardcore. Firstly, the minimap. This is such a key element of the BF4 game that to do without seems to me to be just too much of a sacrifice for realism. I enjoy realism greatly, but BF4 is a balance between realism and fun, and the minimap performs so many functions and is integrated so heavily with soldier equipment and vehicle customization that to do without it removes some fairly major elements of gameplay. Not having any indication of compass bearing is also frustrating at times. Ammo counter and health bars are also excluded from hardcore, but again, I think this only detracts from the overall Battlefield experience. There is no real reason that you shouldn't be able to gauge what state your body or your vehicle is in, how much ammo you have remaining, or indeed how long it's going to take for your vehicle rounds to reload. Being deprived of that information is neither realistic or fun. And that pretty much sums it up. At the very least, I hope I've been able to make you think about playing classic mode if you hadn't done so before. BF4 is now in really good shape as a result of CTE feedback and hard-working developers, and this classic mode presents yet another step towards returning to the heart of the Battlefield experience. I hope to see you there.